In the last episode of Build, we talked about how diversity and inclusion initiatives are impacting tech and how to navigate conversations with teammates and peers. If you missed that episode, I've included a link to it below. In today's episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper and talk about some of the best practices that you can use to kickstart a diversity and inclusion effort at your company, or if you want to go and contribute somewhere else, what to look out for. So stay tuned. Welcome to Build, brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. I'm your host, Purnima Vijay Shankar. In each episode of Build, innovators and I debunk a number of myths and misconceptions related to building products, companies, and your career in tech. We're continuing our conversation with Melinda Epler and Wayne Sutton, who are the founders of Change Catalyst and Tech Inclusion. And in today's episode, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the best practices that you can use to kickstart a diversity and inclusion effort in your organization, as well as get others to help you out. So, Wayne and Melinda, thanks for coming back on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, before we jump into the best practices, I want to just remind our viewers and our listeners out there, how can we measure success before we start to pursue any sort of tech practice?
Yeah, that actually gets to our number one, the most important thing to start with is measuring where you are now.
Okay.
Is really benchmarking where you are now in terms of diversity and inclusion. So that means doing if it hasn't been done already, looking at the demographics from race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, veterans, people with disabilities, people all across diverse backgrounds, and then also looking at engagement and inclusion and really measuring those as well. There's some surveys out there that you can take internally in a company to really gauge where you are. Before you start, you need to know where you are.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that ranges from looking at obviously looking at the demographics, but also looking at how do people feel? Do they belong? Are they supported? Are they able to really thrive in the company? Are they allowed to rise in the company? Are they supported in growing as a leader in the company? All those things you want to know before you really dive into programs.
Yeah. Now, I know one issue that I run into, and you've probably experienced the same, I think we touched upon this in the last episode, is people come with a lot of great intentions, and a lot of times when you come into these internal groups, though, they haven't really thought beyond those intentions, right? So when I ask them questions like, who's going to be working with me, or what are the meetings going to look like on the calendar, is there a budget, just kind of the basic logistics, it's like, oh, I guess there's some more work to be done, right? Because they haven't thought through what's budget, what's a rollout, what's sort of opposition. So how can we kind of get around that initially? And what's sort of the homework you would recommend after doing what you said about the benchmarking?
Yeah, I think you need, if you're going to start an employee resource group, an ERG, or an affinity group, or something like that in your company, you need to know, what are your objectives? What are your goals? What does it look like at the end of the year? What have you accomplished at the end of the year? And how do you design a program that's really going to get to those outcomes? Because we see that as well. We see a lot of affinity groups, and it's important to find a safe space for people to get together. And then the next step is, how do we go further? How do we do more? How do we start to develop each other as leaders? How do we grow as an organization? How do we help the company change its processes and systems? How do we get to the next level?
Yeah.
And I believe also is setting realistic expectations around what the goals and outcomes could be. Right? Often people come to us like, well, they put resources towards this, they made this type of investment, they hired this person, they did this event, and they expect the magic to happen. They expected the doors open where all the underrepresented candidates going to come apply to the company. They expect their brand to change. They expect some of the heat from the press to take off. It's like, no, you did one thing, right? It's like you send one tweet, you don't expect the world to follow you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's setting expectations around diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the product analogies apply here as well. Like you said, you don't do one marketing campaign hoping that you're going to 10x your revenue. So why would it be any different with a lot of these efforts?
Exactly.
Yeah, and also you need to use agile design as well. Like really think, like if it's not working, change it. If something is not effective, do something different.
Yeah. So let's get on to maybe the first best practice that you would recommend to our audience out there who wants to kickstart an effort.
Yeah.
I would say the first best practice is one we have to, for us is like we need to identify who our core audience is, right?
Okay.
Like if you are someone at HR or has a head or in a role of head of diversity and inclusion, or even in product, it's like Melinda articulated. You do need to measure it, right? You need to start with let's see where we are, see what our numbers are like, or it could be let's talk with executive leadership around how creating inclusive culture, having a focus on diversity and inclusion is connected to our core values and our business goals.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's start right there.
Yep.
Right? Not just let's just run with it or we're going to do diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Because in the day, what we've seen and what has been happening is people say they work on diversity and inclusion, they put resources behind it, it's not connected to the business goals, and they haven't set the benchmarks around measuring success.
Right.
And so it's like, in the year, what do you have to show for?
Right.
Or at the end of a program, what do you have to show for?
Yeah. And there's a huge disconnect, and then people feel like, oh, nothing's changing.
Exactly.
And all these programs are useless, and let's just go back to the way things were. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned tying it back to business goals. So do you have an example or a case study you can share of either a company that you worked with that was really good at doing this, or even took a first step?
We have several companies that we work with, but it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like the reason why we pause is because there's not a single company we can point to say that is doing it well.
Sure.
And then doing this work, what Melinda and I have learned is that there's this opportunity of shaming. Yeah. Right? And we can say, we work with Asana, right? We work with Reddit also. We work with B Corp. That's us in some of the consulting training or workshops. We also worked with Capital One. We did a workshop for their a network of startups on how to create inclusive cultures from the start with. That was about 20 startups from size of 5 to 200, right? And we can name just some of the well-known name companies in that area as well. At the same time, we can say that some of the impact of those companies, we can give an example saying that we work with them, they completed X, but that's not necessarily an endorsement that those companies have it all figured out. Okay. It's almost like we have to say disclaimer on that. Like we're not saying that, oh, here's an example that Asana is doing or Reddit is doing, and everybody should copy it. Right. That's not saying that they have everything figured out. Not saying that they don't have everything figured out. It's just that it's just the state of the narrative around this industry and around the conversation around diversity and inclusion. Okay. It gets emotional fast. Okay. So
maybe a best practice is to not expect immediate results, but to say, okay, you did one thing. Let's see if that's replicable, and then maybe in 5 or 10 months, years, whatever your benchmark for time is, then take a look back. Yes. Yeah. Right. So don't call it an early success until you've really seen a number of dots lining up.
Yeah. But you
can celebrate incremental successes, but it's not fundamentally shifting.
Yeah.
Yet.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But one example is that we did work with Asana around their recruiting process, right? And Melinda and I we held a workshop training on mapping out the entire recruiting flow and identify areas where they can make some improvement on sourcing differently and how it can do some of their screening and their in-person interviews better. And they implemented some of those changes. And we're also communicating when they have diversity also around how did that affect their goals around increasing their numbers around diverse employees or underrepresented employees. So like that is one example.
Yeah.
But was that a success?
Right.
We know change made. We know change was made. We know that there was a learning window created. We know that some process was changed, and people grew from that session.
Okay.
But it's still like they still measure numbers, and there's also these other quantified elements that goes into play when you're talking about success. So that could have been success from us working with them to help change culture, mindset, and a process. But for the company in itself, it is yet to be determined, and there's other variables. Well, if the goal was to hire us to do that, to help them increase their numbers, well, what other factors went into play around them increase their numbers?
Sure.
That outside of our control.
Sure.
And that's where this work we do, we've been doing it now for like years, for a long time.
Right.
And we feel like people need to broaden their mindset on understanding the impact and measure success around diversity and inclusion, right? Success could be one thing, or success could be 1% and 2%.
Right. So what's another best practice then, if we're thinking a little bit more broader?
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot of people come to us who aren't necessarily in a position to go to leadership, or they've gone to leadership and leadership has said no.
Yeah.
So what do you do there?
Right.
Do you just give up, or do you think about other things that you can do outside of that?
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things you can do regardless is lead with empathy. And whether that's leading teams, that's leading products, that's just being a leader in your life and modeling inclusion and empathy.
Yeah.
It starts with listening and really understanding people for who they are and what they bring to the conversation, understanding the perspectives that people bring and unique issues that they're dealing with in their work life. It's also listening to your customers. Really, if you don't have a diverse team, you can't change that.
Yeah.
Listen to your customers. Learn, go out and learn from diverse people who are using your product. If you're leading a team, you can change the way you're leading your team. You can change who you bring on your team. You can change how inclusive that team is. You can change a lot of things about your team.
Yeah.
And really make a difference.
So there's a lot of those micro changes that you can implement, like we were talking about in the last episode, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that are eventually going to add up, like you said. Start with your team, your customers, your leadership, and then go from there rather than always wanting to enact change top down.
Right, exactly. And there are a lot of things that underrepresented, that you can do as an ally as well. There are a lot of really amazing things that you can do that make a big difference in somebody's life.
So let's talk about what an ally is first.
Yeah, so an ally can really be anyone. It can be you, it can be me, it can be Wayne. Pretty much anybody can be an ally to someone who has less privilege, right? Or someone who has equal privilege, quite frankly.
Sure.
And really looking at the little things you can do to help support others. To if you're in a position of greater power or leadership, you can bring others up with you that are underrepresented. You can disrupt little biases and microaggressions that come to play in daily meetings. For example, you see somebody who's consistently their ideas are being shut down or taken over, or they're never able to get a word out.
Yeah.
Then you can do something to disrupt that. You can do something to disrupt. I mean, if you see harassment or something like that, there's definitely something you can do about it. It's really hard for an underrepresented person to come out against their own suppression, you know, and so there are lots of things that allies can do, little things that can make a big difference in somebody's life. There's also mentorship and sponsorship and mentoring somebody who is underrepresented and really helping them grow their career, giving them advice about how to take the next step and become a leader. Sponsorship is more around, again, that's it's, if you're in a position of power, really helping sponsor somebody else to be there as well.
Yeah.
It also could be as an ally, maybe you're a part of a dominant group, being asked to speak on a panel, and it's the same
Right.
group of people. It's all white men or it's all white women on a panel. Part of allyship is actually taking a step back and allowing somebody else to speak, and allowing other perspectives.
Yeah, take a break for a while.
Yeah.
Rest your voice. Let someone else have a turn. Yeah.
When I think about the tech industry and this conversation around diversity and inclusion and everything that is bundled up in that, there's been a constant theme that most tech companies and individuals have been reactive instead of proactive. And that is disheartening, right?
Yeah.
It's like, let's wait for something bad to happen, someone to leave and write a Medium article,
Sure.
A sexual harassment situation, or some shaming to happen online, then let's talk about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
I would say that if there's an individual inside of the organization and you're working tech and they want to create change, don't wait. Right? Don't wait until something negative happens before looking at creating change. That could be, talk with a executive, talk with hiring manager, talk with the CEO, set up a meeting, track it, let them know that I'm taking note that I had this conversation.
Right.
Look at the values of the company. And speak up, and that could, and that's kind of like more like, hey, go straight to the top, go to the managers, but also it could be just in meetings,
Yeah.
right? Just in meetings, say, it could be meetings. I don't feel like my voice, my opinion was heard,
Right.
Or are you thinking about a program or a product and saying, well, are you thinking about Black women? Are you thinking about LGBTQIA community? Are you thinking about vets? We're looking at a targeted customer base from any global and inclusive scale or mindset. And so...
and also accessibility, really looking at accessibility from the beginning rather than a reaction to, oh, wait, it didn't work. We have to do that now.
People are dropping off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that? Yeah.
So if people want to create change and they want to implement a diversity inclusion strategy or just get started, so just speak up. Speak up. And there's tons of articles. I mean, tons of research. I mean, we have a blog. We have plenty of resources online, and some of it just is finding an ally, as Monday was articulating, and knowing that you're not alone, and speak up.
Yeah, and take some of those daily steps, like taking your vitamins every day, eating your veggies. So let's end with this note of how can our audience get involved with you two and your company? Yeah,
a few different ways. One thing is, as an organization focused on diversity and inclusion, we need funding. We always do. And so if you have the ability in your company to support us, we have sponsorship. We also can do training and consulting with your company as well. So that's one. Another is we always need volunteers. And we cannot do this work without volunteers. They're amazing. They are part of our team, and they really help make our events in particular happen. So volunteer. What are some others?
First how people get involved is just if you're working on diversity and inclusion, be successful, or often have a conversation with other underrepresented individuals that are saying that if you're working in tech, don't forget to open the door for someone else. Right. And the tech industry, we know the numbers. We also know the numbers of our growing and global population, how diverse it is, right? And if you can get in the door, we can do the best of our ability to help consult, train organizations to create inclusive culture. But if you get in the door and you need help, we're here to help.
Yeah. And I just want to end with, I firmly believe that if we change tech, we can change the world. Because tech is so much a part of the world, and it's increasingly so. Almost every company is becoming a tech company, and we have the power to really make a difference, whether it's in your startup, whether it's in your team, whether it's in your company, whether it's in tech as a whole, the entire industry. If you can affect change in any one of those areas, even if it's you becoming a successful entrepreneur,
Sure.
that in itself is as an underrepresented entrepreneur, that can make a big difference. So you have the power to create change.
Yeah.
Do it.
Well, thank you so much for ending on that inspiring note. And to all of you audience out there, thank you for tuning in today. Be sure to share this episode with your teammates and your boss. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive more great episodes like this one. Ciao for now. This episode of Build is brought to you by our sponsor, Pivotal Tracker.